when you hear the word Victorian, the words panic, moral, and moral panic are seldom far behind, and today is no exception. I'm talking this week about the London Garrotting Panic of 1862. Not heard of it? Well, that's probably because, like all good Victorian scandals, it was a load of hysteria about something that wasn't really happening. Now, to give you a bit of background, thanks to the introduction of the London Metropolitan Police Force in 1839, crime in London was on the decline. But because there was a greater number of arrests and a greater number of actions and a greater number of prosecutions, there was a greater number of reports of crime. And as a result of this, the fear of crime in London was very much on the increase. And nothing got the paranoia flowing like a street garrotting. Now this is a style of street robbery that will be carried out by a gang of three. You have three robbers, one known as a front stall, one known as a back stall, and one known as a nasty man. And they would be placed along the street as the map shows here. Now the back stall is basically a lookout, and it was often a woman that was used for this because she would attract less suspicion from the mark. Now, how to carry it out? Well, a well-to-do gentleman would walk down the street, past the back stall, calls out, past the nasty man, and once he was past the nasty man, the ruffian in question strikes him on the forehead from behind. That throws the head back. He then grabs him around the throat with the other hand, holding the bone of the wrist against the Adam's apple. And with the victim pretty much prone and breathless in this state, the front stall then runs up and removes all the valuables he can strip from the victim in the time. Usually money, wallets, watches, handkerchiefs, glasses, completely emptying all the pockets before the three of them melt away back into the slums, leaving no trace that they were ever there. Impressively efficient, don't you think? Sometimes a cord or a wire would be used, but the effect remains pretty much the same. Now, one reason that we know in detail how this is performed is that a journalist from the Cornhill magazine actually visited a criminal in jail and requested a first-hand demonstration of what the victim goes through. And he was subject to the assault, wrote about it, noted it, and published it. Now, nobody really knows when and where the trend for this sort of robbery started. It is often said that the technique was learned by convicts while being held on prison hulks or being transported. It's rumoured to have been the method deployed by jailers and guards to restrain difficult prisoners. This then gets classically recycled into criminal life when they're released back into the community. And this knowledge then spreads around the criminal fraternity. And that's apparently quite a population. At one point in 1860, the Cornhill magazine estimated that 1 in every 115 people in the country had a record for stealing. And what's really weird about this whole crime, though, is that it doesn't really seem to happen that often. We do know it occurred, but to look at the responses, you'd think there were garrotting gangs lurking around every street corner. The scare comes about from two particular groups that are well versed in spreading fear throughout the general populace. I'm talking about number 1, politicians, and number 2, newspapers. Like most Victorian petty crimes and robberies, this sort of thing went broadly ignored until it happened to an MP. Member of Parliament Hugh Pilkington was attacked by a 3-man gang from behind on his way home from the House of Commons. Well, now something had to be done, and newspapers, magazines and periodicals just couldn't get enough of it. Every case, absolutely every case, and several that just hadn't happened, got blown all out of proportion. The Daily News described London as a lair for footpads and assassins by night. The Quarterly Review claimed that the streets of London are not safe even in the daytime. And the typical Victorian values of fear of the lower classes and the base racism of the time never that far away. The public clamoured to insist that the treatment of criminals in prison was just not harsh enough, and that this was a typically un-British sort of crime which could be fixed if we just got rid of those pesky immigrants, particularly the Irish. Even Charles Dickens got in on the scene, stating in an essay that the streets of London were as dangerous as the Italian mountains. Other press outlets blamed everything from French revolutionaries, which was impressive given that there had been 80 years since the French Revolution, all the way to even blaming the Indian thuggee. But the fear was there, and it was combined with the belief that the police were pretty much ineffective against this sort of crime. I mean, how could the police cope when 1 in 115 people is a robber and only 1 in 870 is a policeman? Or the public would have to take matters into their own hands. Helpfully, the media was not short of recommendations to how to safeguard yourself. Punch magazine, taking an opportunity to poke at the inefficiencies of the police, posted plenty of cartoons about gadgets you could use to prevent a garrotting. The famous Mr. Tremble overcoat pictured here, or the over-the-top spikes of the anti-garrotte collar, is often cited as being patented, but they really aren't. These are just over-the-top lampoons from the pen of Punch magazine. But there were protections that did get patented and produced. These stiff leather collars were an easily produced defence against a wire around the neck. Or you look at this American patent for a steel collar with a wire-cutting knife embedded in the front. And if that's not crazy enough for you, then how about Henry Ball's patented anti-garrotting belt pistol? This attaches to the back of the belt and is fired by string at the front, thus delivering a reasonable caliber bullet directly to the abdomen or groin of your attacker. Ouch. Think I'm making this up? They actually have one of these in the self-defence gallery of the Royal Armouries in Leeds, so please go check out the original artefact. It's well worth it. Now, to give you an idea of just how hysterical the London middle classes could get in this time, 2 men actually attacked each other in self-defence. After the fight, both men insisted to the police that they thought the other was going to garrotte them, and thus they were just acting in self-defence. But in amongst all this hysterics, the public was demanding action, and they demanded that the government do something. And this rarely works out well. And like many other cases, this would have far-reaching consequences to combat a problem that existed mostly in people's heads. In fact, the Shoreditch Advertiser had investigated all the reported cases in the district of Shoreditch and found all of them to be either utterly fictitious or drunken squabbles. But in fearful response to increasing public demands, Parliament passed the 1863 Security from Violence Act by 131 votes to 68, even though by this time actual verifiable reports of garrotting were pretty much non-existent. What this Act of Parliament did was it reintroduced flogging as a judicial punishment. It also helped return prisons to being the harsher environment of hard fare, hard bed and hard work, undoing many of the early Victorian prison reforms. These changes would stay in place until the Prisons Act of 1898. In fact, flogging remained on the statute books until the Criminal Justice Act of 1948. So, as a clear result of outright hysteria, hundreds and thousands of prisoners experienced harsh, degrading and brutal conditions for decades afterwards. The legislation had been described by reformers as panic legislation passed after the panic had gone. And it didn't even reduce crime. But then, isn't that just the Victorian way? Thanks for watching. Bye bye.